helped a bunch of friends. I helped a bunch of friends a while ago who all had a connection with Ibiza. So, some of them were born there and had moved away. Some of them were Brits or Swedes or Germans or Americans who spent a lot of time there to set up a local foundation exactly like this. The consensus was the island was under assault from ill-considered development, over-extraction of water, decline in traditional local farming practices, loss of biodiversity, overfishing, too much plastic, all the obvious stuff. And I suggested that, in fact, if they were to peel back the curtain and have a look behind, they would find lots of brilliant local initiatives, individuals, little groups doing brilliant things to try and turn the tide on some of these problems. And if they were just to look for those people and give them a little bit of money, that they would be able to turbocharge that work. The upshot was that they did come together with my help and establish the Ibiza Preservation Foundation. And fast forward to today, that little foundation is spending nearly 1 million a year on environmental projects in Ibiza. I mean, Ibiza, even though it's so popular as a tourist destination, is becoming something of an example in the Mediterranean, even globally, on how you balance the needs of tourism and development with environmental sustainability and having lots of nature. There's just so many things that have improved dramatically in Ibiza since we set up that little foundation. The seagrasses are now protected and expanding for the first time. Certainly the loss has been curtailed. Small farming is back in business, and lots of hotels and restaurants are now buying products from local farming, and all those amazing terraced almond groves and things are being looked after in a way that they hadn't been for decades. And there are marine protected areas throughout the Balearic Sea now, which are burgeoning with marine life in a way that hasn't been seen for decades. It's just super effective groups that they've found and that they're funding with relatively modest sums of money. So this little initiative in Ibiza turned into the Conservation Collective. Some of the team are on this call. I'm chair, and we've done it 20 or is it 21 times since then. So we've established 21 locally focused environment foundations in Mallorca and Cyprus and Barbados and St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Devon, the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, Sri Lanka, they're all of Tuscany, Sicily, they're all over the place. And really they arise out of two insights. The first is that while most people don't put time or money into environmental causes, they do, or they're much more likely to, if they're given the opportunity to do so in the place that they really love. So if this webinar with the same group of people was convened to talk about plastic pollution in Indonesia, I expect we would get a much lower rate of engagement than we will because all of you love Antigua. You all have found some kind of joy and happiness in that place. And so that's the first insight is if you bring groups of people together who have a strong personal connection with a particular place, they're highly likely to want to participate in making that place cleaner and greener and more vibrant. It works as a proposition. That's why we have 21 of these foundations. They've given out nearly $15 million dollars or euros, I forget, in the last 5 years. The second insight is that it doesn't cost very much to do wonderful things when it comes to environmental renewal. If we'd convened here about Antigua, but the proposition was let's build a new hospital and we need 50 million bucks to do it, we wouldn't get very far. It's expensive, it's hard work to solve most problems. But when it comes to the natural beauty of a place, the natural vibrancy, it doesn't cost that much. You just need to kind of take the pressure off, and nature naturally recovers. You've all seen some of the results on Redonda Island. A bare rock, which is now verdant green, and species that are endemic to Antigua are thriving there. The place is really a marvel. It's a beacon of hope for the whole Caribbean region, what's happened on Redonda Island. And that can be repeated on other islets and on the main island of Antigua itself, on Barbuda. If you just give nature a chance, it will recover dramatically, and especially in the sea. If you can establish marine no-take zones and provide protection for marine wildlife, Michael Bloomberg said it's the greatest J curve you can find in the world. The hockey stick growth in abundance. Because I think everyone in this call knows that whilst Antigua is magical and beautiful and has something really special about it, the natural abundance of the island is not a shadow of what it would have been 2 or 3 human generations ago. Well, all that can come back very quickly, and it won't cost us much. We just have to find the best people at the grassroots and empower them. Modest grants. Average grant size across the Conservation Collective, I think, is $15,000 or in that region. So relatively modest sums of money given to the right people succeeds in turbocharging their work, and the impact can be transformational in a place like Antigua. So the purpose of this call is really to hustle you all and persuade you all to come together and make a standing order commitment of however much you feel comfortable with, preferably a standing order that you're willing to forget about and leave for years and years and years. And for you as a group, to come round together around a team and distribute that money to the best local initiatives on the island. And you'll be staggered, not only by the results and the impact that can be had if we spend the money wisely, but also by how addictive it is. And we've done this 21 times and people don't fall away. They love it. It's a really nice way to bring people together. And the impacts are just so rewarding that it is an addictive thing to do. So we hope you'll join us. We hope that some of you will even agree to join a steering committee and help decide where the money is spent. We hope you'll tell your friends and organize little drinks parties and events and so on. We really hope the Antigua and Barbuda Environment Foundation comes into existence. And the last thing I want to say is that the Conservation Collective is a really, really kick-ass organization. They really know how to do this in terms of being a kind of mothership that spins out these satellites and then supports them and builds connections and collaboration and so on between them and oversees all the stuff that a charity needs to worry about, from human resources through finance and legal and all that stuff. The Conservation Collective, led by Jade in the middle of your screens, really, it's really kick-ass. We know how to do this. The magic is in creating the initial momentum, and then it will just run. So I hope we have a successful call, and thanks for inviting me to contribute.
Thank you, Ben. I'm going to hand over to Mark now. I wish I could pinpoint people on the screen, but you may have to just do that.
Hey, hi, great. Thanks, Ben. You've almost done my job for me, because I wanted to kind of talk to the need for this, and I think, well, I know I'm not alone in having a kind of deep sense of concern about the multiple pressures on the precious ecosystems of Antigua Barbuda. I mean, after all, I guess the evidence is all around us wherever we look when we're on in the place. It's the invasive species, the lionfish you see as you go scuba diving, or the destruction of the blanching of the coral reefs, an amazing, I mean, extraordinary, depressing level of development on the pristine coast of Barbuda, storm damage to the sandbar, protecting the lagoon, Codrington Lagoon, or I guess the droughts that are now. I guess, like many of the islands in the Conservation Collective, Antigua Barbuda seems to be facing the perfect storm: climate change, unsustainable development, and huge biodiversity loss. And depressingly, I guess the situation at its current trajectory is only going to get worse as climate change bites, extreme weather events become more frequent, and sea temperatures rise. But as Ben says, there is despondency and despair, but there is also hope. And you only have to look at Redonda, like Ben's mentioned, to see how well managed and coordinated interventions can completely transform ecosystems for the better. And we're going to hear about it later. But that miracle has been repeated many times on multiple islands around Antigua, through the work, unstinting work of the EAG, Rewild and Flora and Fauna. That endemic species have returned, biodiversity has blossomed. The world's rarest snake, the Antiguan racer, has been saved, and the speed at which things can improve and change. Like, again, like Ben said, the J curve is extraordinary and inspiring and gives hope. So what is to be done? Well, I would say not only is Antigua Barbuda blessed with extraordinary natural assets, beautiful ecosystems, it also has an extraordinary fan base. And I'm not just talking about the local population. I'm also talking about those of us who are lucky enough to own holiday homes there. Those of us in whose hearts Antigua and Barbuda holds a special place. And it's there that I see an extraordinary opportunity, because we are all united, like Ben says, in a love of these islands, and we're all lucky enough to have the resources to help. And yes, many of us contribute to things like the Jumbie Fund and the Mill Reef Foundation, but I have to say that their focus is almost entirely on social programs, not environmental. There is a huge need to address that. And then you speak to the conservation charities working on the ground in Antigua Barbuda, and the repeated story is one of scarce resources, lack of capacity, and constant fundraising challenges. And given the scale of the challenge, has to change. And therein lies what I see as an amazing opportunity that the Conservation Collective presents to us, using their expertise and experience, the templates of best practice, the shared learning established over many years of setting up similar fundraising conservation foundations across the world. We have an amazing opportunity to tap into a federation of like minds and experts, an opportunity to professionalize local fundraising, to bring scientific rigor to how and where we grant our funds to grassroots organizations, and a chance to address the chronic lack of capacity and scarce resources with which the local conservation organizations struggle. So I hope that the stories that follow me inspire you to and make you believe that we can turn the ship around. And more importantly, if I may, also inspire you to support us in this endeavor financially, as we're only halfway in our fundraising efforts. And I think you'll all agree there is no time to spare. I would ask one last thing, as Ben intimated, that in addition to the funds that we seek, we also need you to help us. We're seeking to establish the steering committee, and we need inspired and interested people to join us, to give us a few hours of your time each quarter. And if you're inspired by what you hear and think you can help, please get in touch, because we need you. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm going to invite and introduce you to Stefan Hornsey. I'm going to unmute him. And I think, Iona, are you able to share his slides? Stefan is the director of St. Vincent and the Grenadines Environment Fund, which was launched in 2015, I think the third member of our global family. And Stefan runs this alongside Louise Mitchell, who founded it with Ben and Brian Adams about 10 years, nearly 10 years ago. Wow. And Stefan's just going to give you a little bit of an insight of what it's like to run a local CC foundation in the Caribbean and talk you through a bit of the amazing work they're supporting and driving.
Great. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Jade, for inviting me onto this call. It's really exciting to hear about Antigua and Barbuda Environment Fund coming on stream. You know, as a fellow OECS country, we share the same currency, same sort of geographical area. And I went to school with some people doing some amazing environmental work there. And I know they need help from someone like an organization such as what the Antigua and Barbuda Environment Fund could be. So it's really, really exciting. I think this fund can have such a huge impact into making their lives so much more easier in terms of doing the work that they so passionately want to do. So really exciting that there's so many people on this call now listening and learning about what it is that the Antigua and Barbuda Environment Fund could be. So I'm here to just really give some ideas, maybe inspiration, or even some lessons about what we've done at the SVG Environment Fund. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. Great. So this is just a general overview of a few of the projects that we've had, because as you see, Jade's correct, we started in about 2015. We're still going strong. 26 projects over those years. A few more added on to that as of the end of this last year. We have about 25 different grantees and partners, which are all so essential to the work that we do. The donors, we can't do the work without the donations. It's impossible. The idea, a million US raise in all of those years has a very different impact in terms of what Ibiza might have, $1 million per year. But really, it's really when it comes down to what Ben said, he's totally correct. Something like 15 or 19,000 US can be an entire project that has an impact change on policy of the entire nation. So it's just really incredible about how these local connections on these small islands could really make things happen. So as Jade mentioned, the Environment Fund was born from a collaboration with Brian Adams, or stalwart in Mystique's conservation, really just an amazing person doing amazing things throughout his entire life, who gave his time to the Environment Fund to help it become what it is today and still involved in everything that we do. Louise Mitchell, the former chair of the National Trust, protecting St. Vincent's heritage and thus the environment, which is what led to this really important work, which I'll be talking more about. And Ben, his vision for all of what he does at the CC and St. Vincent being a part of it. It's just amazing to be a part of this entire global umbrella, which the Antigua and Barbuda Environment Fund, ABEF, I would imagine, is now looking to become a part of. It's really exciting. So you've heard echoed here from what I have written down before, some climate change challenges. With St. Vincent, we've had Hurricane Beryl come through this year, which was the earliest recorded Cat 4 hurricane to hit us ever, and earliest in the year. So, it's record-breaking in devastating ways. And I know Antigua and Barbuda experienced Irma and Maria back in 2017, which is really, really devastating. And then the warming oceans, which again is hurting the home that I grew up in here in St. Vincent, right outside Villa Beach right here. We're seeing coral just absolutely devastated, and it's heartbreaking. But it's different, when these things used to happen before the Environment Fund, it was just heartbreaking. But now when these things happen, we're like, what are we going to do? We have a template to do things. So it's a different feeling altogether, and we can do something about it. Again, the island development and the environment, unsustainable development, all of these interests coming in and competing with the same space that they want to be a part of and sometimes ruining it. It's a real shame, and I think having the platform like the SVGF, when we have so much coverage of all these different areas, from the freshwater rivers to the marine space to the forests, we get a better understanding of how to guide people in many different ways, from protection to development to maybe understanding how best to leave things alone at the end of the day. And caring for our marine spaces, there's so much importance there as an island nation, a small island nation at that. And with St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we're more than 32 islands, and many of them uninhabited. And it's really, really important to be able to manage all of that. So I'll be talking to you about just 3 of our projects, which I think can be interesting for you to hear about today, as just some examples of the work that we do. We go on to the next slide, please. Yes, so we have a sea turtle project. From the OECS, St. Vincent was the first country to put a total ban on sea turtle hunting back in 2017. So very, very shortly after the fund was launched, and through the work of the Environment Fund is how that ban came into place, largely so. There were so many things that went into it. So it started off and had an amazing achievement just a few years in, which is important for all of the work that we still do today under the Turtle Project. And the Turtle Project today is running through Edmiston Foundation, and their funding is crucial to our yearly development of the project. As each year, as we grow our coverage and we encounter new things, we understand that, okay, with next year, we will shift and address these challenges. And as we're, even throughout the project, there are things that will arise that we'll have to address. That that flexibility and how we do things and how we address the challenges particularly is so important. And of course, we have regional partnerships with the, so the second logo there is just the logo for the project that we've developed to help bring the awareness of the project. The third logo is a Barbuda seat to the project. Collaborations with other well-experienced organizations as well allows us to give us the confidence in building our capacity, both under our program and also by teaching others how to do the work that they want to do. All these years of monitoring, being a part of the project has allowed us to just tell people really how to use these spaces sustainably. And then the Forestry Department of Fisheries Division are key government contacts when it comes to working with the projects. So next slide, please. Yeah, just another general overview. So a total ban as of 2017, we have 19 monitors on 15 beaches. And one of the primary things that we're dealing with today is anti-poaching. So it's an interesting balance. So yes, next slide. Thanks very much. With the Sustainable Fisheries Management of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it's a key partnership with the Blue Marine Foundation. That's a UK NGO who works directly with us on the project. We have people from the local fishing communities, as well as Blue Marine and the SVG Environment Fund participating in dive surveys to collect the information. So if we look at the photos on the right, we have the Minister of the Agriculture and Fisheries in the middle, Blue Marine team on the right, my director, and also Jade on the left, all being a part of this important conversation about getting this policy through, about protecting marine spaces. Dive surveys in the middle picture there, and at the bottom, important community consultations with the fishers to abide by the enforcement and also provide their voice. So next slide, please. So yeah, from that project, we have the first ever conch season in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which is amazing. Ever since having this conch season implemented, we've had people from the Bahamas, talking about it, other Caribbean countries coming to us and asking about this process, how to get it done, what have we considered. And it's taken a lot of work, over 100 dive surveys. And we're looking at also establishing 4 marine protected areas, which are approved by the fisherfolk themselves, kind of bottom up. And then, of course, that connection with the ministry is really important as well, and an extensive report for other recommendations. So the next slide, please. This is an incredible project. Like Ben mentioned, it's not that much. This is about just shy of $20,000 US, building upon previously done research, but getting it to the finish line. It's an inventory of fresh and brackish water fish of St. Vincent. So our islands depend on fresh water, and St. Vincent's rivers are at risk in so many levels. And the species that inhabit them are an incredible sort of indicator of the health of our rivers, our freshwater spaces. So the next slide, please. So this is Mr. John Renton, who is such an important person on this project. He is the grantee who is leading all of this work. He's coming up with 13 suggested conservation responses for freshwater species, 4 species of fish and 1 crustacean documented for the first time in scientific literature for the nation ever. 30 rivers surveyed on St. Vincent, and a peer-reviewed published paper among the scientific literature for students, for the government, for any scientist wanting to further his work. Just the people we work with make these things happen. With the environment, the people we're a part of the problem, but we're also part of the solution. And people like this are the solution. They come with all of the knowledge, knowing where their gaps are, how do they need the support, and what the funding can get. In this case, all of this information. And just moving forward from there, onto the next slide. So furthering to John's work, he also introduced a component to the project which looks at the traditional fisheries. So there's these amazing spaces which are utilized by the traditional fisherfolk, and looking at their relationship with the environment as well, and how their lives are impacted by the rivers, and how they're also an indicator of the species health, because they were part of the survey, and using traditional fisherfolk to better understand the environment. And the next few slides is just further example to that. So again, these are the spaces.
Call time, Stefan, in a second, because I need to hand over to Jenny. I'm so sorry, because I could.
Of course.
This.
Of course.
But
thank you all so much, and please get on board. Please join.
And also Stefan's an amazing photographer and wildlife guide. So if anyone wants to go hiking around the volcano in St. Vincent, he's your guy. So zooming back over to Antigua, just inviting Jenny, I've probably muted you, so please do unmute yourself. And I'll see if I can spotlight you. 1 second. Oh gosh, where's it gone?
Right, I don't think I'm muted now, but
Okay.
all good.
Move spotlight. Yes, there you go. Go ahead.
Good. Well, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Jade and Ben, for this invitation. So I've just put a few slides together, really just to showcase some of the existing rewilding work that's been taking place in Antigua and its sister islands. As you'll see from my title, I work for both Fauna and Flora, which is a long-established conservation organisation from the UK, and Rewild, which is from the US. Essentially, we work based on requests, locally identified needs from partners in the Caribbean. If we can just move on the slide. There we go. So my relationship, my love affair with Antigua really started back in 1995 with a request from both Antigua's Forestry Unit and the Environmental Awareness Group, or EAG, about what to do about a really rare snake, the Antiguan racer, a little harmless snake that lived only on this little Great Bird Island, which is that yellow dot shown on the map there. And this rather remarkably led on to one of the world's most ambitious rewilding programs, even before the word rewilding was even existed. Next slide, please. So here's Great Bird Island, and we quickly discovered that the main threat to the racers were rats that lived on the island, non-native rats that were wiping out the racers. So the first action that took place in 95 was to remove the rats from Great Bird Island. Next slide. And we could start to see a transformation with the vegetation improving. It wasn't just although we did this for the racer snakes, we could see the ecosystem itself, the island itself, starting to visibly improve. Next slide. And oh yeah, a few more slides, please, a few more clicks. So this then, so excited by this response, we started removing invasive alien species from other islands around Antigua. There's a few more to go. I think there's been a total of 15 islands have been restored by removing invasive species. Next slide, please. And you'll see the Antiguan racer, great success. Their numbers climbed up as the removal of these pests and the restoration of their habitat improved, their numbers climbed. Next slide. But we also saw a fantastic recovery of seabirds on these islands too. And this is really exciting because not only are seabirds lovely to look at, but they're incredibly important links between the land and sea. And where you've got seabirds, you have healthier coral reefs and you have healthier mangroves. These seabirds are actually integral to the health of the sea. Slide, please. And actually, here's a model showing that tremendous recovery of seabirds on those 15 offshore islands after those invasive predators were removed. Next slide. So this was really exciting, and the Environmental Awareness Group and the government partners got really fired up about this and hit on the idea of, well, what about Redonda, this terribly degraded island, which is situated near Montserrat and Nevis. I don't know how many of you have seen it. It's quite a long way offshore. And this was in a dire state because of goats and rats on the island. So next slide, please. So by about I think it was 2017, the restoration took place by removing rats and goats from this island. A very difficult operation. It required a large network of collaborators. Next slide. But you can see already this was within a matter of, actually that was just 4 years later. But you could see after removing those pests, the island itself, without planting a thing, the island itself started to come back to life. Next slide, please. Here's another view. That's what it looked like in 2017. And this was a photograph I just took slightly earlier this year, and you can see trees popping up. Next slide. And already, I mean, some of the trees are just vastly taller than myself. And this is, I think Ben referred to as this kind of remarkable power of nature to rebound and recover when we remove those pressures. And here's a summary of some of the sort of changes we saw. These photos perhaps don't do justice to the sheer range of recovery of wildlife we've seen, including rare native species, seabirds, bats, and just the recovery of the land, reducing the impact of erosion on the surrounding reefs. So next slide, please. So I'm just showing this. I mean, there's obviously been a lot of other kind of conservation projects we could talk about in Antigua and Barbuda and Redonda. But I just wanted to kind of leave you with the thought that really this the new fund is in a really exciting place, because you're building on this foundation of what is already quite a lot of expertise and determination and enthusiasm for conservation rewilding. I know groups like the Environmental Awareness Group, Barbuda and Go, the Elkhorn Marine Conservancy, national parks. All these groups have big ambitions, great ideas of what to do. And of course, a lot of it comes down to funding. So I'm very excited about this fund being formed, and hopefully connecting those of you who love Antigua to people like these who are trying to restore and conserve and look after the country. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. So coming back to where we are with setting up this new foundation, which we've invited you all here to talk about. So I have been working with my team and with Mark and other potential supporters to follow the kind of usual steps that a conservation collective foundation takes to get set up. So the last couple of months, and I apologize, it's very small, the writing, but the last couple of months, or sort of 6 months, has been focused around raising funds. We have a target of $150,000 US before we launch. And we've got, just over halfway there. We're about 80,000 verbally committed and continuing conversations. And those funds are committed on a basis of every year for a minimum of 3 years. So that gets us a kind of rolling fund, as it were. We're then forming out of that group of donors a sort of small steering committee that will be chaired by Mark, but we'll have other funders on that group, as well as people who are sort of giving up their time and expertise to join. This will be the official decision-making body of the organization. It'll meet quarterly. It'll approve grant applications and advise on strategy, as well as driving fundraising opportunities. And then we will kind of really hone in and develop a grassroots strategy. So we have a draft scoping study that we have turned into an executive summary, which we're happy to share after this call, outlining some of the key environmental challenges and opportunities that have already been mentioned on this call, as well as a kind of outline of civil society on the islands and in the region. And what we will be doing next is taking that and drilling it down much more into kind of what are the short, medium and long-term goals of the foundation, identifying priorities with many different consultations with expert advisors, as well as interviews with local groups. And then we have been lucky enough in the last 2 months, we've been recruiting for our executive director. We had a really great pool of candidates, and we've hired someone hot off the press, sort of agreed yesterday, and who'll be introduced to supporters and our wider network in the next couple of weeks. But that's really exciting to have someone on the ground who can drive it forwards, because we're all doing our best from farther afield, but it's excellent to have someone actually who's kind of living and breathing, being in Antigua, to get this going. And the next kind of steps there will be to fully establish an advisory board. So Jenny has just spoken, and a few other key members who've worked within conservation on the island have kindly agreed to join an advisory board who will help screen projects before they're brought to our funding committee, as well as give ideas on the kind of things we should be supporting. Then we'll be setting up, oh, hang on a second, still going. Then we'll be setting up the legal entity. So we've got some discussions underway with lawyers, but then developing branding and getting our kind of system set up. And with any luck, we'll be able to be in a position to be giving out grants in kind of Q2 or Q3 next year. So going to move on, I'm going to kind of whistle through the next slide so that we have time for Q&A. I think Iona, next slide. I think just showing everyone, this is a kind of broad map of the CC Foundation so far. And I think we can probably end the slides there, Iona, and stop the recording so we can give people a chance